In just a few hours from now, the Senate is expected to vote on Kevin Warsh, the president's pick to head the central bank. Warsh cleared a key Senate vote yesterday, putting him on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and is now one step closer to becoming Fed chairman. Warsh will replace Jerome Powell, whose 8-year shift at the helm has, of course, been mired, the source of frustration with President Trump over the past year, the two repeatedly clashing over interest rates and inflation. Well, now inflation is spiking under pressure from the Iran war. New data shows that wholesale prices are up 6% compared to last year, the biggest jump since 2022. Let's bring in our MS Now Capitol Hill reporter, Kevin Fry, and former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Jared Bernstein. Kevin, the Senate is supposed to vote later today on whether Kevin Warsh will become the new Fed chair. What do we expect?
Yeah, I mean, we expect the vote to be not all that different, if at all, from what we saw yesterday when they voted to put him on the Board of Governors to begin with. That was 51-45, with only one Democrat crossing the aisle to vote to confirm him for a spot on the board. Now, if it does follow anything like that when it comes to this final vote for whether or not to make him the chairman, that is going to be very much a break from precedent over the last several cycles, where we've typically seen these votes be very bipartisan. I believe it was back when Powell was confirmed the first go around under the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, that 39 Democrats voted with Republicans to give him that top job. So if this is much more of a narrow divide, that is certainly breaking with precedent and does speak to the concerns that Democrats have about whether or not he would just basically be a rubber stamp for the president's desires.
So, Jared, it's hard to overstate sort of the tumult that Warsh will find himself in, the economic tumult, if and when he is confirmed. So he's coming into this during a very challenging time. We mentioned wholesale prices up 6%. Overall inflation numbers from the last month were at the highest level in 3 years. What's behind all of these numbers, and how does that complicate Warsh's role if he is confirmed?
Well, certainly the war is playing a really pronounced role in these higher inflation numbers you just cited. The gas price this morning, $4.51 nationally, of course, much higher in states like California, but that's up 50%. The oil price over $100 a barrel. Not only is that affecting headline inflation, it's bleeding into other parts of the economy. Airfares are up, food, groceries. There may be, we often think that the gas price is the price consumers see the most, and that's true. But grocery prices are right behind that. And the fact that we now see food prices also spiking is of great concern to consumers. And that, again, takes us right back to the war, because 80% of our food is delivered by trucks, which mostly run on diesel, and that's up even more than the regular gas that folks purchase for their cars. So certainly the war, tariffs are in the mix too. And this is a big headache, as you've mentioned, for the incoming Fed chair. I agree that he's likely to be confirmed because it's going to be awfully hard to do Trump's bidding and cut rates in that kind of environment.
So, Jared, you mentioned gas, you mentioned the price of food. What's the next domino to fall in the line in the fallout from this Iran war? What will consumers see next?
Really great question, Ariel. And the next domino to fall, it's actually already fallen, but I'm not sure if people are quite focused on it yet, is the real wage. That is the buying power of the paycheck. We saw yesterday with the release of the Consumer Price Index that prices are rising a little bit faster than wages right now. And that means that buying power is flat. Over the last year, these developments that we just talked about, whether it's consumer prices or wholesale prices, they've essentially wiped out the gains. There's the figure. They've essentially wiped out the gains in wages. And that's going to be really big for people who are already stressed about prices. Now they've got a problem on the other side of the equation. Their buying power of their paycheck just isn't what it was.
Kevin, Warsh has been a frequent critic of the Fed. He's even signaled that he's open to lowering interest rates, which President Trump has been pushing for. But during these confirmation hearings, he's promised to maintain independence from the president. How could all of that influence how the Senate votes today? I know we said it's pretty much a fait accompli that he's going to get confirmed, but is he going to face tough questions?
Yeah, I mean, look, he is going to continue to face a great deal of scrutiny, particularly from Democrats who are going to be watching every single move he makes. And this is in no small part because Democrats and even some Republicans, most notably Senator Thom Tillis, were very critical of how the Trump administration has interacted with the Fed, in particular Jerome Powell, over the last several months. Of course, the only reason we are even at the point where he got confirmed to the Board of Governors, let alone has a chance of getting confirmed chairman, is because the DOJ relented on this probe of Powell and his handling of the renovations at the Federal Reserve Building just across town from here. There was a lot of concern that was purely political pressure campaign that was being put on Powell to do Trump's bidding. And so Democrats are going to be continuing to monitor this to see what Warsh exactly decides to do and whether or not he complies with the president wants, or as has been outlined, perhaps has to deal with the various economic pressures that are coming as a result of the Iran war.
So speaking of those economic pressures, Jared, give us a reality check here. With inflation as high as it is right now, a 3-year high, is lowering rates possible, and is that a wise choice?
Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible. It's not looking at all like a wise choice, given everything we've been talking about. And remember, Kevin Warsh is going to be one voting member on a board of 12 people. Now, obviously, the chair has some persuasion behind his title. But as far as the Fed board is concerned, you already have seen in recent notes from them a change in what they call their bias. They no longer have so much of what's called an easing bias, meaning they're looking to lower rates. Their bias at this point, or their kind of vibes on where rates should go, is pretty neutral. And I think with these new reports that we've talked about, we really haven't heard from the Fed on them, that neutral bias is even going to be challenged. Basically, there's no way that Warsh can walk into this Federal Reserve and credibly argue for a rate cut unless there's some very different data things that happen between now and then, which I don't think is the case. Now, it's possible that some of these pressures could unwind if the war were to pull back some, but we just haven't seen that. So I worry that these pressures, including on wages, on workers' paychecks, are going to continue, and that means no, the Fed is going to have a hard time cutting into that kind of climate.